Brad Edwards, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
Oh, thank you. I am doing well. I'm happy to have survived Week 12, which my radio partner Matt Schick labeled as WEAK 12 because of the national schedule. And look, we got through it. There was a little bit more drama than we were expected, including at least a little bit in Tuscaloosa for half the game.
Yeah, and maybe get your thoughts. What did you think about Alabama's lackluster performance, especially that first half? Any thoughts about that? Maybe just overlooking the Citadel?
Well, it was funny because, we started the show with, and this is something that, a lot of times there are pockets of the day when you have a 7-hour show where you kind of run out of compelling things to discuss and you're just, manufacturing conversation. Well, quite a few times in the last month and a half, we have gotten into this Alabama first half line thing as far as the Vegas point spread for the first half alone. And, Alabama had kept that streak going. And right at the start of our show, we mentioned that the Vegas had just gotten that line up. It was like 40 for the first half. And I made the comment that that's ridiculous. Like they're offering you free money if you want to take the Citadel. And I had 3 reasons for that. It was like, one is that, well, there's actually one reason. It really came to 3 things. But one is that the Citadel runs an offense that Alabama doesn't see. And so they're going to have some success with it just because Alabama can't possibly be prepared at the level that they normally are to play. But then the other part of it is that it's not only going to milk the clock because they're never throwing, but it's also going to eliminate the possibility of interception, return, touchdown, or sack, fumble because they're never dropping back to pass. And so I said for Alabama to be up 40-something at the half, they're going to have to score a touchdown within 3 or 4 plays of every offensive possession because they're not going to get as many offensive possessions as they usually do. And look, I wasn't expecting 10-10 at the half, but it didn't surprise me that they were able to, the Citadel was able to get some first downs, milk a good bit of clock, minimize first half possessions. And, certainly Alabama was a little flat. I mean, they clearly weren't hyped up to play on either side of the ball, and it showed. And, it's kind of one of those things where, look, you can ask the media to write and say negative things about your team as Saban did earlier in the season, and there are all sorts of things that you can use to attempt to manufacture drama. But there's nothing like having a game against an FCS team that's tied at the half to really get your attention. And I think more than anything else, it was good for Alabama in that it was that wake-up call that you just can't go out there and go through the motions and think you're going to dominate people. And clearly we saw the wake up in the third quarter there. And so while some people may panic because of it, I just think it's just such an unusual situation. I think if anything, it was probably good for Alabama. And we'll see this week. I mean, if they go out and struggle again with Auburn, then maybe that's a bad sign. But I think, like I said, it's going to be more of a wake up call than anything else.
Hey, Brad, what's your thoughts on this offensive line? Because now we're going into the final week of the regular season, and we keep saying this team is still got some work to do on that offensive line, and they continue to beat people, and they'll be the favorite as we travel throughout these playoffs. Just your overall thoughts on this offensive line as a group.
Well, there have certainly been games where they haven't looked great. I think I could say that, though, going back pretty much every year. I mean, like even the 2012 offensive line, which was dominant by the end of the season, had a couple of games that season where you weren't sure what was going on there, and then they put it together when they needed to. And so I don't tend to read as much into the games that when they're huge favorites like I used to. The LSU game I thought was a really good performance by that offensive line, both in pass protection and in run blocking, obviously. And then they followed that up with the next week, not looking very good at all against the best defensive front they faced all year in Mississippi State. But I think there are a number of things going on. I mean, you're obviously well aware of the injuries that have kind of messed with the continuity on that line. I think offensively in general, there's been another layer to this. I think the Devontae Smith injury kind of I think it affected things a little bit in terms of the passing game and just the crispness of everything when it changed the rotation a little bit. So I think all of that has kind of contributed to the offense. But bottom line, I think it should be one of the better offensive lines that Saban has had, and I think that we'll see that here down the stretch as they play probably all good defensive teams from this point forward. But you won't really know for sure until they get out there in those games. But I'm certainly not anyone who's going to press the panic button right now on the offensive line based on what I saw last Saturday.
Brad, and one of the great things about technology, it's a lot of fun, but sometimes it's aggravating a little bit. And you were giving a historical perspective on Alabama, and the darn Bluetooth rang in my truck. And literally just took over, and I'm trying to reject this call, and it's trying to get back to what you guys were talking about. It was Saturday night, and you were talking about it from an Alabama, something that they've done, and literally the Bluetooth took over, and I missed it. Do you remember the nugget that you were sharing?
Yeah, it was, and I saw that Alabama had something similar in their own post-game notes, so they just used the cutoff at a different point than I did, but I was just pointing out that with that win on Saturday, they became the only team in the poll era of major college football. So that's since 1936 to win 11 consecutive games by more than 21 points. I think the Alabama note was 20 points or more. I thought it was more impressive that they'd actually done it by more than 21 in every game, since that's kind of the 3 touchdown mark. So it's pretty impressive to think about that no team had ever done this before, won 11 straight games by more than 21 points. And there was only one other team that had ever done it in the first 10 games to start a season, and that was Nebraska in 1971. And their streak ended when they had to play Oklahoma the next week in what was one of those game of the century games, where people who are college football historians know that as the Johnny Rodgers punt return game that Nebraska ended up winning 35-31. So I don't know how much longer this streak can last. I would give Alabama a chance to continue it this week against Auburn. I would be very impressed if they continue it in the SEC championship game and beyond, but at least to this point, they have already done something that no team before them had ever done.
Your thoughts on Auburn? Can this team come into Tuscaloosa? We always say throw out the record books, but sometimes that's not been the case. Generally, when Alabama's been great, Auburn's been down, Nick Saban sort of beats them by a pretty good margin. Your thoughts on the Auburn Tigers coming to Tuscaloosa on Saturday?
Yeah, and it's not just Saban. I looked at this because we have the top 3 teams in the country, all playing a rival this weekend, and all of their rivals are unranked. And so I just tweeted this out right before I got on with you. I was looking at, when these teams are ranked in the top 5 and their rival is unranked, what's the history in that series? Alabama is actually 16-0 all time when they are ranked in the top 5 and Auburn is unranked. And only 2 of those 16 wins were by single digits. So it's not just under Saban. I mean, going back under, and I realize most of the other games are going to be under Bryant. But in this series, when Alabama is good, even on the other side with Auburn, I had looked at it. Auburn, when they're in the top 5 and Alabama is unranked, Auburn is 3-0. So within the series, top 5 team versus unranked team is 19-0. And so there are other series that are different from that. Like Notre Dame, for example, in that same note, Notre Dame, when they've been top 5 against an unranked USC, they've won 4, lost 3, and tied 1, and 3 of their 4 wins were by single digits. So there are some rivalries where the records literally don't matter. In the Iron Bowl, they pretty much do. It just is very, very rare for there to be a significant upset in that game. And I think that same thing applies here, which is that Auburn, while they have good defensive talent, I think for a lot of this season, they haven't quite played as well defensively as people thought they would coming into the year. And then certainly on the offensive side, I think their inability to run the ball is a big deal against Alabama. I expect them to be one-dimensional. And, I think it really just comes down to turnovers as far as how ugly it could be. Because you look at the LSU and Mississippi State games, 29-0, 24-0. LSU didn't turn the ball over until their final offensive play of the game. Mississippi State didn't turn the ball over on offense. They had that muff punt return. And I think that they were able to kind of stave off that Alabama avalanche, by not turning the ball over. And that's what Auburn has to do in order to kind of hang in there, I think, in order to make this respectable, is just not make any huge mistakes, start giving Alabama easy points. Because if they do, I could see Alabama easily winning this game, 30-something to nothing, 40-something to 7, whatever it may be. I just think Auburn's going to have a really hard time scoring. I think Alabama will, they'll have to punt a few times. It won't be, a track meet like some of those games earlier in the year. But I still think ultimately they'll overwhelm Auburn if Alabama doesn't turn the ball over, and even more so if Auburn does.
How concerned are you going into the playoffs that place kicking here in Tuscaloosa has been a disaster?
Yeah, that's one where I understand why Saban continues to use his kicker, because he's probably looking at it as, there could be a situation where, let's just say you got to trot the kicker out there on the last play of regulation of the national championship game to kick a field goal to win it. Might sound familiar. And you want to give him the impression that you have confidence in him, and that's why you continue to do it. But I can tell you, just from a neutral perspective, not being the one who wants to keep that kicker's confidence up, once again, it's easy for me to say because it's not my team and it's like I'm playing a video game. But if I'm Alabama, I don't attempt any more field goals. I don't attempt any more extra points. I go for 2 every time after a touchdown. I figure you make half of them. That ends up coming out the same as making every extra point, which they're obviously not doing at this stage. Anything 4th and 5 yards or fewer, they're probably as good of a chance they're going to pick that up as it is that they're going to make the field goal. And obviously, if you convert it, you're keeping alive the chance for a touchdown. And even with the punts, I realize that they haven't had any disasters so far in the punting game. As far as the opponents are getting returns, which is a good thing. But I'd think about going for it on 4th and short when I start to play better teams, because you can't count on a significant field position change with the punting game being what it is. So I think with how good Alabama's offense is, they should really consider. And I'm not going to say you never punt, because look, it's 4th and 10. You don't want to do anything stupid. But I'd be leaning toward just trying to keep the punters and kickers off the field as much as possible.
Hey, Brad, you know a little bit about kicking. What are they doing wrong? Can you find something? Is it mechanics? Is it the hold? Is it the snap?
No, you know what? I haven't gone back and kind of gone through slow-mo to analyze mechanics or anything like that. I've got to believe that's not the issue. So much of the time with kickers, it's in the mind.
Okay.
And look, I know there was at least one. I didn't go back and look at the ones from this past weekend. There was one. What was it? The game? Which game was it?
Oh, they missed so many.
LSU game. The LSU game. There was one that was a bad snap or hold. That one wasn't on the kicker. But most of them have been, and I just think there gets to be a point where it's not just mental because of personal past failures. It's this whole combination of everything, cumulative effect of. Going back to Cade Foster and the 2011 LSU game. Anyone who's kicking at Alabama is well aware of the number of misses of field goals and, to a lesser extent, extra points, because those haven't been as big of a deal in big games. And there's this, you can feel it, I'm sure, in the stadium. Like every time there's a miss, it's just this collective moan from the crowd, and it's just. I don't imagine you could kick at Alabama and not be completely aware that no one in that stadium has any confidence in you. And that has to affect you mentally going in. And so like I said, I think that has as much to do with it as anything.
Brad, final thing, Michigan, Ohio State, your thoughts on this game, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at this, and you look at the history of this rivalry. Ohio State's won 13 of the last 14. Michigan hasn't won in Columbus since 2000. And that alone should tell you that Ohio State should have a little bit of an edge here. But then you start looking at everything else. Well, actually, let me throw on top of it. Michigan is only a 3.5-point favorite. At least that's what it opened at. I don't know if it's moved. And so all of this would suggest that there should be some sort of edge for Ohio State, in that it's considered pretty much a toss-up type game, according to Vegas. And yet you start looking at the numbers, and the only thing that jumps out at you is even between these teams is the record, and the fact that they're tied going into this for the lead in the Big Ten East, and whoever wins this game is going to come out of it. But you start looking at, offensive numbers, defensive numbers, all this stuff is in Michigan's favor. And the way that Ohio State's defense has been giving up big plays all season long, you just wonder, are they capable? Because this is it's not a talent issue. I guess in some ways it could be, but it's not a physical talent issue. There are a lot of missed tackles, guys getting out of position, things like that, where you just wonder, are they capable for one game of just not making all these mistakes they've pretty much been making every game all season long? If Ohio State can do that, I think they're capable of scoring in the 20s on Michigan, which is a really good defense, by the way. But Ohio State, I think if certain things go their way, could score in the 20s. You just question, how could they possibly keep Michigan's offense down given the problems they've had defensively? But like I said, everything else being considered, you have to give Ohio State a chance. And so that's where it feels weird. It's just like kind of watching these teams in recent weeks. It feels like it would be a huge upset for Ohio State to win, but you look at all of the other like intangibles around the game, and it's like, well, it really shouldn't be considered that big of a deal if they do. I like Michigan just because I have to trust what I'm seeing on the field more than recent history. But would it be a shocking upset? No, of course it wouldn't.
Brad Edwards, you're going to be making it back home for Thanksgiving? You're going to be staying in Bristol, Connecticut?
Oh, I will be here. I have not been back home for Thanksgiving or Christmas since I haven't been back for Christmas since 1995. Since I moved up here. I actually did get to go to the Egg Bowl in, I think it was 2001. Got to see family there Thanksgiving. So that's the closest it's been for me in a long, long time.
All right. Well, Brad, listen, man, thanks so much for being a part of the show. Happy Thanksgiving from all of us here in Tuscaloosa. I hope you have a great week. Thank you again for being a part of the show.
Same to you and everyone there. Take care.